Hello there, thanks for joining me on Awakening with Russell Brand, or Awakening for Russell Brand, or just Awakening Russell Brand. This week I spoke with Bob Roth. Bob Roth taught me how to do transcendental meditation. He's taught loads of famous people, if that's the sort of thing you care about, and we do, don't we? Here we are caring about it. So Bob Roth, in this part of the conversation that's from my podcast, Under the Skin, from Luminary, you can subscribe to that if you wanna, talks about the effects of transcendental meditation. They're increasingly becoming scientifically demonstrable and empirically trackable. He talks about its impact on health, on psychiatric health, mental health, and the intention of the David Lynch Foundation, who taught me to meditate, to bring meditation to as many people as possible. I hope you enjoy it. Stay to the end. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of it, and let me know what type of meditation you do. Do you get that second daily meditation in? Are you meditating enough? Could you do more? Bob, I refer to you pretty frequently, when I talk about my meditation teacher, often when I'm doing guided meditations, which I'm, let's face it, not qualified to do, or whether that's in front of a live audience or on my podcast, Above the Noise, I say, my meditation teacher says. We make no effort. My meditation teacher says. Sometimes I give you a name check, Bob, but I don't like to cheapen the meditation by saying the words Bob.
In two words, you've absolutely dropped in the estimation of your audience.
They'll heal that.
Oh, that guy.
Some of them have search engines, Bob, and they'll put Bob Roth into a search engine, and the simple truth is your face will come up at some point, and who needs to deal with that?
Certainly not me.
Bob, how's it going I suppose when I ask you how it's going, what I mean by that is, how is your work with the David Lynch Foundation going? How is your mission to spread transcendental meditation to as many people as possible going? How is your endeavor to see that as many people can be freely taught TM as possible going? How is your belief and the Maharishi's belief that if enough people learn to meditate, the world will change, consciousness will change? How does your work relate to the geopolitical issues of the day, the war in Ukraine, the horrors of the pandemic? Do we need to meditate now more than ever? Have you noticed more people are interested in meditation? Tell us it all, Bob, and for God's sake, plug your headphones in.
So we're going to start with the first question. My favorite color is blue.
Good. Let me write that down, Bob, because I don't want to miss any of this gold.
No, what we're doing, what the David Lynch Foundation is doing right now, is in the process of conducting or funding large-scale, what they call phase 3 clinical trials on the effects of transcendental meditation on trauma, the effects of transcendental meditation on burnout, depression, anxiety, and resilience, and the effects of TM on heart disease, particularly high blood pressure, with the purpose of having TM adopted and covered by the Medicare and the private insurance companies. So it would be treated as any other medical or healthcare intervention, which would then bring the meditation to hundreds of millions of people in the U.S. without any concern about having to pay for it or anything. There would be no barrier to a person learning, and that's going really well. We're working with the Veterans Administration on the PTSD study, and I'll just say one thing, and then I'll stop. We're living in a pandemic of trauma and toxic stress, and the conventional approaches of pop this pill, and I got nothing against legitimate medications for anxiety and depression if people need them, or bipolar disorder, those are fine. But we need to expand our understanding of what a medical intervention would be to include things like transcendental meditation. So I've been teaching for 50 years. I feel like we're right at the precipice of something really big happening at a very good time in the world.
So it's fascinating you say that, because obviously people that glean their understanding of reality from rational and material means would probably judge that we're in a place of crisis, in a place of globalized trauma, in a sort of as you've explained it to me before, a Kali year, an age of darkness, Kali Yuga, a time of
Kali Yuga.
Thank you, sir. A time of doubt and uncertainty. And obviously this is something we'll talk about in greater depth as we go on, dear Bob. But what I wanted to pick up on there is, because when you talk about sort of the impact of TM on potentially on observable cardiovascular conditions or heart conditions, that sort of is interesting to me. But when you say something a little more potentially abstract, like burnout or in particular trauma, how does that tally with the idea of samskaras and trauma. What kind of translation would you use between modern terms like trauma PTSD and Vedic terms like samskara? What corollary do you see between
It's
those
just
terms?
different vocabulary. It's the exact same experience. There is no barrier. There's no wall between mind and body. It's not like, oh, I have a very traumatic experience in my mind. I see something horrible, and then I'm in a room, and then I have to open the door to go into my body. It's a continuum. So if you're talking about, you can talk about the neurophysiology of higher states of consciousness. You can talk about the neurophysiology of spirituality. You can look at it from either side. You can look at it from transcendent experiences of ananda, of bliss consciousness.
What does that mean?
And
Ananda? Ananda, bliss consciousness.
Ananda, yeah, ananda is bliss. So, so you have, it's called, or Brahmi Chaitana, any of the words you want to use, or you could use the term restful alertness. It doesn't matter. It's the exact same experience with a different vocabulary. So sanskaras are impressions, traumatic experiences in the brain, and the associated, you could say, diseased or dysfunctional metabolic patterns and what's the word? Come on. Neuropathways. Same thing. There's no difference, just vocabulary.
I'm always fascinated when we find that these distinctions are, superficial, or at least pertain only to semantics and signifiers. That this is an indication of the depth of wisdom that is contained in that literature, preempting as it does knowledge that doesn't become materially and rationally available for several thousand years. Does that not give you cause for concern in that the advance of transcendental meditation requires a kind of yielding to the vocabulary and potentially even the ideologies of, sort of rationalism, in this case, in the form of medicine?
But no, actually the opposite, because what it does is it opens a person to the experience and the relevance of these eternal phrases, whether it's from the Vedic literature, from Buddhist literatures, from Christian tradition, whatever. So actually it makes more relevant these words and more meaningful these words than otherwise. Because otherwise it's just words. You hear Brahmi Chaitana, or you hear, Turiya, fourth major state, Turiya is fourth state of consciousness. What does it mean? But if you have an experience of that transcendence, and then you also, you use language that is familiar to a person, you say, oh, that's a hypometabolic state or restful alertness. And then you hear, oh, in the ancient times they talked about that as Brahman consciousness or bliss consciousness. And here are the descriptions of it: infinite, unbounded, eternal, universal. Suddenly it's much more relevant.
Adam,
I think that modern science, modern medicine, those terms can open the door to those deeper levels of life. And I should say, no less equally scientific, but also cosmic, spiritual as well. There's not a difference. It's one continuum of life.
I know that the Maharishi was particularly keen that the language of meditation, transcendental meditation in particular, was couched in sort of scientific and perhaps especially secular terms, presumably to make it more broadly appealing because of the ultimate goals that I've touched upon already of getting as many people meditating as possible in order to change reality. Bob, what do you think when you hear now that that beneath the quarks, the bosons, and the leptons, the best theories that we have is that there's a kind of a quantum field which contains all of all material reality, i.e. that there is a kind of omnipotent field that contains all reality. Do you think that's another example of how sort of Vedic philosophy and scripture preempts ongoing scientific discovery?
I think it can be a guide. I think we have to be careful, though, because you're talking about unified field theories. And so we can't exactly say, and from what I've read, which has been a lot, that modern science has discovered this unified field, this idea that underlying all forms and phenomena, all matter fields and force fields in the universe is an underlying universal field from which everything emerges. That is one of several theories, and probably the most advanced theory. The way I like to say it is what modern science is glimpsing today as the underlying reality of life that Einstein in the latter years of his life was looking for, this unified field theory, has been known for thousands and thousands of years from these ancient meditative traditions, ancient traditions of consciousness that described a unified field of consciousness, which was at the basis of all the forms and phenomena in nature. But here's the difference. If you talk to a physicist, the physicist will say, we will never be able to access that power of the unified field. You could never build a linear accelerator. You could never build an instrument large enough to be able to access that energy, power, intelligence of the unified field, like we can access the electromagnetic field or gravitational field.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with me and Bobby Roth. Do you meditate enough? Do you feel enriched by that conversation? Do you believe that if you change your individual consciousness, collective consciousness will necessarily change? Because consciousness is a fundamental component of reality, not an emergent property of biochemical processes. And if you found that interesting, you might enjoy my conversation with Brian Cox, which is also on Under the Skin from Luminary. I'll put a little bit of that up somewhere else on YouTube. You'll be able to enjoy that as well. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what kind of guests you want to see on Under the Skin. What kind of areas interest you? How is your meditation? How is your mental health? Who do you want to see me talking to? All of that. Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. It's really important that you subscribe to it. Put on your notifications bell if you can stand to do such a thing. More important, and if you enjoyed this video, please have a look at this one or this one. More important than any of that, though, is that you please stay free.